Hello, everyone, and welcome. You have chosen the SCS Sports Podcast, your destination for local sports news, be it high school, be it professional, or whether you just want to listen to us ramble on about professional wrestling or old Seinfeld quotes or crazy movies that we all like. Welcome to the SCS Sports Podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Gary Thacker Insurance over at 2382 Battlefield Parkway. You can reach them at 706-866-8283. Also, the Chattanooga Flower Market, 8016 East Brainerd Road, 423-899-2440. Phil's Primetime Pizza down in beautiful Chickamauga, Georgia, 122 Gordon Street. That's 706-375-4448. Our good friend Greg Payne, host of Restricted to the Dugout with Greg Payne and the Payne Mortgage Team. You can reach them at 423-645-9404 for all of your mortgage needs. And finally, Choo Choo Barbecue, who make it possible for us to bring you the scoreboard on Friday nights. The Choo Choo Barbecue of Chickamauga scoreboard. You can reach them at 12960 U.S. Highway 27 at 706-375-7675. And as Ringo Rob likes to say, you don't know Q until you know Choo Choo. We also want to say a special thank you to Matthew Mays and the good friends and members of Jupiter Coyote, one of our favorite bands, and they provide the music for the show. Those guys have always been great to us, and we hope you guys will reach out and try to check out their music as well. So sit back and relax and hold on, and we'll see where we get to. And welcome everybody to this Wednesday afternoon edition of SCS Sports Podcast. Rusty Scott Robb joining you live in Studio X. A lot of sports news to talk about. Major League Baseball is in full swing. Had a Masters finish for the ages. Had some great stories came out of this Masters. We've got NASCAR was up in Bristol on Sunday racing on the dirt, which you don't see all that often. Just a lot going on in the sports world. We're gearing up for the for the NFL draft here in just a couple of weeks. We got we're not far off from the NBA playoffs beginning because the NBA playoffs
tournament's already started.
Yeah, I mean
last night.
What the NBA playoffs last 3.5 months? It's crazy, but we got NBA playoff action
2 weeks before training camp.
Yeah, I mean. The new Ted Lasso dropped last night. I mean, we've got a lot to be excited about these days.
Let's take a stab at last Sunday because, Masters don't come around often enough, it doesn't seem like, but there's always something more so than just the tournament. There's so much special about that. But here's one of the things that has kind of, I think, gone very quietly in the way that Phil Mickelson played. I think that has not gotten a near enough hype about it. He looks like he's lost some weight, too.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that right away. He looked
I love the fact that he had on all black.
But where did he find that game at?
He's always had it. I mean, that's the thing is, I literally sat here on this podcast last week and told y'all, you be careful with those old guys. Those old guys that have been there, won it, they know how to play that golf course. They know where those pins are. They know, they can pull that book back out from 5 years ago and see what they did on the best round they ever had and go, oh, okay, I went there. And Phil's no different. Phil's one of those guys, and all you got to do to understand why his game is where it is there is a video, and I'll send it to you, Rob, to let you see it. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever watched. And it's Phil Mickelson talking about when he hits wedges, what his thought process is in hitting those wedges. And it is him talking for 5.5 minutes about hitting a pitching wedge and all the factors. He's talking about the grass, the water, the wind, what time of day it is. Is the ball hot? Is the ball cold? I've never heard anything like it.
Well, if you remember when he paired with Brady and Manning paired with Tiger, and they were out there, Tiger made mention too that Phil talks too much about the game, and goes over and over and over. But again, I'm not saying he's not a great golfer. He's been an outstanding golfer. I guess my question is in the form of where did he find that weekend of play? Because that hadn't been his norm for a while.
Well, he mentioned they interviewed him, and I think it might have been Friday afternoon. He was in the press room, and he's like, look, he said, I know my results haven't been that great, because he's been on the Live Tour and he hasn't been playing all that well. The scores haven't. He said, but I'm close. He said, I'm really, really close. And he said, I don't think it's going to be that far away before I finally put it all together. He's like, I'm hitting the right shots. They're just not, I'm not getting the putts to drop and stuff like that. He said, but I'm really, really close, and I think I'm playing well. You add that, then he goes to Augusta where he's got plenty of confidence, where he knows the course, and then all of a sudden, he shoots 65 on Sunday, and I'm watching the leaderboard. We're at dinner,
but he did have 4 good rounds.
Yeah,
he didn't sometimes, unfortunately, I think Tyler's health is just way too much for him. He needs perfect conditions and perfect luck. But he has such a hard time nowadays putting 4 rounds together.
Yeah, but I'm watching Phil, and I'm looking at the leaderboard, and I'm refreshing. I'm like, is this for real? Is this the same Mickelson? Is this a different Mickelson? And I was like, no, there he is. And all of a sudden, he birdies 18. He's sitting there at 8 under.
Yeah.
And I looked at my wife,
and he's playing.
I'm like, we've got 2 golfers that still have to go through 13 and 15. I said, if one of them dunks it in the water, I said, Phil could win this thing. And of course, they didn't. And John Rahm just played out of his mind. They're the last 36 holes,
and really a guy there that
to see Phil back in there at 52. Are you kidding me?
Really, John Rahm. There's a story of a guy that people just like. I mean, he's the next great Spaniard in the long list of guys like Seve Ballesteros, and as much as I hate to admit it, Jose Maria Olazabal.
The first person that grabbed him when he came off and gave him a hug,
of course he was.
I said, "Hey, there's Rusty's favorite golfer."
Yeah,
I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Long story."
Yeah, but I mean, literally, just the same vein. Just such a. He's probably, to me, the most likable of all of them, because for as good of golfers as Olazabal and Seve both were, they weren't really approachable, likable guys.
Can I ask you this question, because I don't know the answer? Ron played college golf in the States. Did the other 2?
I don't think they did. I don't think either one. I think both. Yeah, I think
back
both
then,
of them. You played the mini tours. Yeah, you would play the mini tours over there, and then make your way. A lot of those guys. Norman's another one that never played. Never played collegiate golf.
And here's the pretty cool thing. Ron went to Arizona State, whose coach was a guy named Jim Mickelson.
Yeah,
the
Phil's
brother
daddy.
Of Phil.
Brother, yeah.
And Phil kind of took John Rahm under his wing when he first came out on tour. So for them to finish 1-2,
and also
that was pretty cool.
Also a school with a multi-million-dollar practice facility that was donated by same said Phil Mickelson. Yeah. And all this talk this weekend about the amateur that played so good, 16th place finish. Lest we forget, the last amateur to win on tour as an amateur was Phil Mickelson. He won the Tucson Energy or whatever out there years ago, and had where you wear the Spartan helmet at the end. But I mean, he and legitimately several times in his amateur career was right up there at the top and could have won. So
I really thought Sam Bennett, the amateur.
Sam Bennett is a phenomenal player.
I thought seriously after
wasn't
Friday,
he as high as 3rd at one time?
He was 8 under.
Yeah, I'm saying he was as high as 3rd at one time. Yeah,
yeah, and I'm like, this kid's got a shot. He legitimately has a shot to win this. And then he finally, he got off to a kind of a bad start that 3rd round. And it kind of
experience on the weekends always gets you.
He kind of fought back to keep it where he did.
And such a good story too. I mean,
fantastic. But when Rahm hit the shot into 8 and made the birdie there, I'm like, okay, this may be it. And then when he hit the shot on 13, that pitch, and rolled it up there right next to the cup, I got on Facebook right there. I said, congratulations, John Rahm, on winning the Masters.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, he's got 5 holes to go. I'm like, it don't matter.
And let me ask you this, because I don't remember this.
Well, those last 3 or 4 are playable. I mean, they're,
Yeah.
He leads
unless he hits the water in 15, which I don't think he's going to. I said, he just won the Masters.
He leads for 3 rounds. And at one time, he looks like he's going to run off and leave the pack. When's the last time somebody that led for 3 rounds won the tournament?
The last time...
Who went bell to bell?
Jordan Spieth, I think, one year went bell to bell.
Okay. Which is very hard. We've seen that scenario before, hadn't we?
Well, two times.
Seen that exact scenario.
Two times the patriarch of the Live Golf Tour, Greg Norman, led for 3 rounds, big time led for 3 rounds, and coughed it away both times.
6?
Against the year against when Faldo caught him, he was up by like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I mean, that one was he had ran away and hid. Now, in Norman's defense, Faldo Europeaned him to death that day. He took his time. He walked shots off. He looked at every putt a bazillion times and slow played Norman to sleep.
Yeah.
Because Norman's was always one of those players that if you let him get in a rhythm. I mean, I remember the year that Hale Irwin won the U.S. Open back in the early 90s. Norman on that Sunday came out and shot like a 63 or a 64 something that day and actually flirted with the lead down the stretch because he was just on fire. But, congratulations to Jon Rahm. I mean, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. He's one of the guys featured on the PGA Tour Full Swing show. He's just a likable guy. He's a big Ted Lasso fan. You'll see him a lot of times quoting the show and stuff. He's just Rahm's a good dude.
God, he can play.
Good dude.
Well, and again, him and Koepka complained about the pace of the game in the players in front of him. And wasn't the one of them in front of him the amateur?
The last round,
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's who they're complaining about on the set. Now, I watched him approach shots. He does take his time. He does have a lot.
Well, I mean, and it's understandable. I mean,
ball.
he's an amateur. He's never been there. He's never seen the course. I mean, cut the kid some slack. I mean, he's an amateur playing against the best players in the world in a course that he's dreamed about playing probably a million times, but he's never been there before.
But now you can understand if you're the other group now. You don't you don't like the fact that you're hanging out and waiting when you're getting in a little rhythm.
But the rules is you're paired up based on how you've done, and he deserved to be in the next to last group of the day. So,
and boys, let's be honest. I'm gonna tell you right now, you ain't gonna find a single hand worth of people that give two you-know-whats about what Brooks Koepka thinks about his pace of play or anything. That might be the current most disliked player on the PGA Tour.
I thought that him and the other one had a beef at one time. Bachambo. And I thought Bachambo was the disliked one, and Koepka was the wearing the white hat. When did that change? Just going to the other side?
No, because DeChambeau's over there too. I mean, they both went to live. I think a lot of it, I think there were a lot of folks that there was just something about him that they didn't like. And I've heard several people tell me, like I'll have, since I'm the golf coach, I got people that'll come up to me at school and they'll be like, "Hey coach, you watch that PGA Tour show?" Yes, I do. Boy, I tell you who I don't like. And before they even say it, in the back of my mind, I'm like, Brooks Koepka. And they're like, "Boy, I don't like that Koepka. I don't know what it is about that guy, but he's a jerk."
Is he a little outspoken?
He's just got this air about him.
It's a bit of cockiness.
It's an arrogance.
But
okay, I've never paid much attention.
He's just got a quality. Let's just say it like that. He's just got a quality about him that in this modern era of players, with so many cool guys out there with great stories and great personalities, he's just not one of those guys.
Here's your question.
I was pulling for him. I was.
Here's your question.
Well, because that would have flipped the golf world on its head.
Yeah, and I was probably pulling for that more.
That's what you were pulling for.
Just live, but why was Norman not invited?
Live.
Strictly that.
The
former champion.
No, not a champion, but a former major champion, just not a Masters champion.
Wait, he never won Masters? I thought he did. Okay.
No. Pettiness.
Okay.
No, 4 times he had it or 3 times he had it literally snatched away from him.
I thought he had one. So that was all about that.
Mm-hmm. Every bit of it.
But had he won a champion there?
Had he been a past Masters champion, they couldn't have told him he could. See, so the way the Masters exemptions work for those of you out there that don't know this, if you win the Masters, you get a lifetime exemption. From that point forward, you can play the Masters every year. You can come back and go to the Champions Dinner. You can do all the festivities.
You can be a one-and-doner.
You may one day be invited to be one of the honorary starters. You get all those privileges. There's a green jacket waiting for you at Augusta National any given time that you want to go down there, and if you ever want to play, all you got to do is call, because you are a former Masters champion. If you are a former U.S. Open champion,
I gotta get that.
You get a 10-year exemption. If you,
Ten's at 5.
It's 10. The Open is 10. U.S. Open's 10. British Open's 10, and the PGA I think is 5. Because I don't know what.
There's some other ones too.
There's some other stuff you can, but there's no such thing
top
as a
12 and ties.
Yeah.
You get to come back the next
top
year
150 on the money list. But there is no such thing as a sponsor's exemption into the Masters. No matter how much money Nike's got and how much money they would like for you to be there, had Tiger Woods not won tournaments leading into that first year of him being out on tour, he would not have been. And the only reason he was there those years leading up to it was because he was the defending U.S. amateur champion. Mm-hmm. There is a strict list. I was talking to my boys about this today about, they didn't realize how cheap everything is when you get on site.
They did so many stories about that. They'd send
$10 sandwich, chips, and a beer.
They'd send a guy to the concession stand with $20. So what can you get for $20? He'd come back with like 3 sandwiches,
yeah,
and a drink, and an ice cream sandwich.
You can get an egg salad sandwich for like $1.50.
Yeah, pimento cheese $1.
I mean,
the most expensive thing they have is $6.
Well, they've gotten a pretty premium to get in the things, so that didn't come.
And the beers you buy, you get the collectible cups that come with them for like $6.
And they don't serve red wine.
Nope.
And let me say,
white, but not red.
I did say this, and
can't stain them jumpsuits, man.
Did not happen, but you know how deep the pockets are there.
Red goes with pimento cheese.
That's true.
Had one of those trees fallen and hurt somebody.
Oh,
the money that some attorney would have lined up.
Oh yeah, I was upset about something I didn't realize. I don't know how I missed this, but I did not realize that the Eisenhower tree was taken down a few years ago.
Yeah.
That I thought when I heard trees on that hole fell, I was like, wonder if it's the Eisenhower tree. And of course I read and I was like, well crap, I didn't realize that they had taken that tree down.
What was that?
16, 17? Yeah, because basically they called it the Eisenhower tree because every time President Eisenhower played it on that hole, he'd hit that same damn tree and he begged them to let him cut it down.
Well, I'm glad he didn't hurt anybody, but when those things fell, first thing I thought, if somebody's hurt,
yep,
they have the deepest pockets.
Yeah, that story would never have made the news.
Some of the patrons were actually pretty fortunate. They said they heard the cracking and looked up, and some of them were screaming, "Get out of the way!"
Yeah.
It was about to fall. They knew it, and so everybody took off running, and bam!
There was a lady that said she heard a man behind her basically scream, and he took off and basically scooped her on the back, like, "Come on," like helped to kind of rush her along.
It came out of the roots.
Oh yeah,
well,
it was 3. It was 3 trees.
And we know what tall pines they have a life expectancy when they start.
And they had chainsaws out there within 5 minutes.
Oh, they had those trees off the course in less than an hour.
Yeah. That way, nobody could come back and say these 3 failed.
And those trees have been told they will not be invited back.
Yeah, you will not be invited back to the Masters. But that's the thing. I was telling the kids today. One of my kids
will be teased later on.
One of my kids, he said, "Coach, you got any Masters stuff?" I said, "Yeah, I got a few Masters things." And he goes, "Really, you been?" I was like, "One time when I was like y'all's age, I got to go." And he's like, "What all you got?" And I was like, I got a ball marker and a divot tool, and I have a couple hats and some stuff like that." And he said, "Yeah." He goes, "I was looking online today. I was going to buy me a hat." And I said, "Really? How much are they online?" He goes, "Oh man," he said, "You ever seen those black ones, the real cool black ones?" I said, "Yeah, I got one of them at home. Wortwine brought it to me last year." And he said, "Well, how much you pay for that hat?" I said, $22. He's like, "Nuh-uh." And I said, "How much was it online, bud?" And he goes, "That hat online, Coach, was $80. And I was like, "Yeah, because, I said, I have a flag from the very first women's Masters, the women's amateur Masters from a couple of years ago. I have that flag." I said, "That flag cost me like $16.
Did you hear one of the stories of...
There's 2 Masters flags down here. They're hanging on the inside of the room.
It was told by one of the caddies that caddied Tiger and somebody else and he has 2 flags. Those flags are not supposed to leave.
Oh, no.
Is that Stevie Williams?
Probably.
Because he caddied for Adam Scott, I think, when Adam won.
Well, he's got 2, and one was Tigers and one was somebody else, and they were talking about he basically took something that wasn't supposed to be leaving.
Well, I will tell y'all this. The most expensive piece of golf memorabilia that I have ever seen, because I used to get catalogs all the time when I had the shop, and the most expensive piece that I've ever seen was a authenticated Masters flag that had been bought from the Masters by Upper Deck, basically, because Upper Deck was who was the seller of this. And there were 11 golf balls framed and matted with this Masters flag in the middle, and all 11 golf balls were signed by former Masters champions. And I don't mean nobodies. I'm talking Jack, Arnie, Player, Tiger, the best of the best.
That needs to go to an auction, not just have a price set.
The wholesale.
Bid on that.
For me to have bought that 20 years ago and put it in the shop, the wholesale on that piece was $700, which tells you retail somewhere. Yeah, but retail on that's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood. Now, keep in mind that was 20 years ago. I mean, right now, right now that 2 or 3 of those guys are dead. I mean,
signatures, everything.
Nowadays, that thing's probably worth $15,000-$20,000 at least.
700?
700 was the whole. That was the wholesale on it. It would have been retail would have been around $2,000.
I was thinking up around 10 to 15.
Well, nowadays that thing is because nowadays you look at it. Palmer's passed away.
Yeah.
His Player's still alive, I think. Yeah, Gary's not. Yeah, Gary. I was going to say Gary's still alive.
Well, see, I watch Antiques Roadshow, and I can already imagine.
Oh yeah,
the price
yeah.
on that would be going up.
We know that Palmer and Nicklaus and the pots that were played for back in those days were nowhere near today's stuff.
Drop in the bucket.
But however,
Winter's Purse went up this year another $625,000.
Mm-hmm.
However, the monies they made on course development and architectural input, those are the dollars that made them the multi.
Oh yeah, those are the dollars that made those guys a living.
Yeah. Jack had his own clubs, his own clothing line before anybody else really did.
You ever get a chance, watch
Spalding,
there's a 3-part documentary about Jack that the Golf Channel did that's phenomenal, and they go through his whole career and they talk about like those early years. He was barely making even as good as he was. Those first 2 or 3 years out as a professional, he finished those years making like $35,000, $40,000, $50,000. Now, granted, at that time, $50,000 was a decent amount of money, but that and the fact that between him and Barbara had 5 kids, I think, 5 or 6 kids. I mean, they.
Of course, he had sponsors.
He did, but there was a stretch where he almost quit playing professionally. He had been offered the golf coach position at Ohio State, and he considered going back on campus and being the coach.
Oh my goodness.
And we would have been robbed. Well, I mean, but the bigger one of all that is go back and look at who I still will always contend arguably is the greatest golfer of all time, and that is Bobby Jones, Georgia's own, the designer of the Masters. Bobby Jones, in one calendar year, won the U.S. Open, the British Open, the British Amateur, and the U.S. Amateur, and he never won a penny playing golf. He never relinquished his amateur status because he felt like that golf was not an honorable profession. The man was an engineer by trade from Georgia Tech, on a whim, took the bar exam and passed it on the first try, and practiced law in Atlanta. Lived in a house that his granddaddy sold him that he paid a whopping $4 a month.
Now, how you're getting this information out there, fans, is you're listening to a high school sophomore teacher who is a history teacher who's providing us.
But I love my sports history as much as I love anything.
Us with some history.
Yep.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody that's got a McGregor model Nicklaus putter they still use.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah, I was going to say, because isn't it and yours is brass head too, isn't it? Yeah.
I do remember.
We got to buff that. We got to shine that thing up one night where it's just like sparkling.
I think 1962 model. I think I looked.
Throw some Brasso on it.
You said it a minute ago. I think his name. I think Nicholas was on Spalding.
He was on Spalding.
That's not really a club.
Not now. No.
And then McGregor for a while. And then he had his own brand with Golden Bear. But then wasn't there some legal thing here not too long ago that he wasn't even in his own company anymore or something?
Well, I will contend forever that if you went back and you take young Jack Nicklaus, the U.S. Amateur, and you hand him, 100 dozen of Titleist Pro V1s, and you say, listen, nobody else is going to have these. They're USGA legal, but you're the only person that we're going to give them to. How many tournaments? If you just gave him the Pro V1, you don't got to give him the clubs. You don't got to give him anything else. Just give him the Pro V1.
And that's why it's so difficult when we start talking about comparing. I was listening to Michael Jordan the other day, and somebody was asking him, did he consider himself the all-time best? And he said no. He says you cannot compare errors. Now, LeBron's come out and said he is the all-time best, but Jordan says there isn't an all-time best because everybody played at different eras, and that's so much so about every sport.
Yep,
every sport.
I've said that for years, but I remember which tournament. There was one tournament Nicklaus won. It might have been the Open in '80 or something like that, U.S. Open. One of those tournaments, he hit a 380-yard one iron.
Yeah, one iron
into the wind and stopped it 6 inches short of the hole.
His last win at Augusta was
1986.
86. Now, Rusty, how much progress in clubs and balls then to say 73 when he was winning everything?
So metal woods didn't come along until
still hitting persimmon.
Metal. Yeah, I was going to say he would have been hitting persimmon woods still. He would have been hitting blade irons, and when I say blades, I'm talking about tiny blades.
Yeah. Like the ones I tried to learn to play with.
Metal woods did not come along until the early 90s. And even then, they were what we all refer to as peanut head or pea head woods because they were just tiny little things. You didn't get, the Callaway Big Bertha, which was the first oversized driver, you didn't really start to see those until around... The Big Bertha came along around 93, 94. Then you had the big, you had the Great Big Bertha, then the biggest Big Bertha. That was around 97, 98. That's when you started getting, and then when you got into the late 90s, you made the turn into the 2000s. That's when all of a sudden drivers went to like 400cc head, and then they went to 450cc's, then they went to 500cc's, and then they went to hybrid, and then they went to, like now, I'll give you a good example. So I have my driver that I hit is about 5 years old now. It's a Ping G30 is what I swing, and I love it. I decided the other day that, I'm a little bit older. I don't have the swing speed I once had. I decided that I wanted to put a senior shaft driver in that golf club. So years ago, for me to put a senior shaft driver in my senior shaft in my driver would be an undertaking. You'd have to heat up the hosel to weaken the epoxy on it. You got to pull the shaft out. You got to put the new shaft in, trim it. However you got to do that. You got to glue it back in. You got to let the damn thing sit for 48 hours to dry out. You know how long it took me to change the shaft of that driver? It took me 3.5 minutes. You have a special little screwdriver that you just take the screw out of the end of it. It has a special insert that goes in the driver head. You take that screw out, you put the new shaft in, tighten the screw down. That's it. There's tailor-made drivers that you can move the weight around on them. You can make them, you can hood the face, you can open the face.
You can change your club.
Sweet spot, you can move it up, down, back.
Pros can change the clubs based on the course.
You can. You can't do it while you're out there. You have to do it beforehand. But like you go out there and you play a practice round and you realize, really, I need to be fading this ball a little bit more. Well, I guarantee you when that guy gets back to the clubhouse, first thing he's going to do is have that little tool back out and he's going to be moving the weights around. But yeah, TaylorMade, they started with that R300 series that they had, and starting in that series, the amount of stuff that you could adjust on a driver, it's like a race car driver adjusting the air in the tires, adjusting the brake bias, adjusting the camber in the wheels. You can do all that stuff now. It's amazing what they can do. That ain't even counting the fact that, irons went to cavity back and then bigger cavity back and then hybrids to where now somebody goes and buys a set of irons, and instead of having what used to be the standard was 3-through pitching wedge, now you buy a 4-through sand wedge, and your 4 and 5 irons aren't even 4 and 5 irons. They're hybrids. They look like little driving irons with the wood type back to them.
I wish somebody would do a tournament and give the players persimmon wood and blades. Just let's see how good you really can.
But the crew that's up there right now, Scott, in all defense, they didn't grow up playing with that.
No, but I guarantee you most of them could play it.
Yeah, they probably could, but it'd be interesting to see. Maybe don't get the hottest ball out there. Let's just see how good of a ball striker you really are.
Give them that Spalding 363 from the mid '80s. I mean, the thing about that is the mishits would come on the driver 3-wood, 5-wood, 7-wood shots. Because all those guys could hit those irons plain as day. Because 3/4 of the guys on tour all play blades anyways. I don't care who their sponsor says it is. Mm-hmm. Most of them play Mizuno MP29s with whoever their sponsor is stamped in the back of them. Because Tiger, for years, when he was supposed to be playing Titleist, he was playing Mizuno MP29s with a Titleist tag on the back of them. Yeah. But that's what the blades are here and there. They could have played the blades. It's the woods is what is the big difference.
Here's a sleeve of noodles.
Good Lord!
Go out there and hit them.
Hit this ball 482 yards, because it'll fly that far. Well, I was telling somebody a story today because everybody's giving me a hard time today because when I went to school today, I had on black pants, black golf shirt, black shoes, white belt.
Phil.
Pure out.
You're trying to be Phil.
Nope. I was pure out Gary Player.
Oh, okay.
I was the man in black. And one of the older teachers goes, "What's up, Coach Player?" And I was like, I was wondering if anybody would notice that this was my homage to GP. But a friend of mine's uncle worked for Palmer Golf back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And he told me a story one time. And he said, his technology started moving along. And he said the first time that graphite shafts come along, he said Gary was one of our guys. And he said Gary was getting a little bit older, and we convinced him, Mr. Player, it might be a good idea for you to change over and play graphite shafts. And he said, okay, I'll try it for a few tournaments. Well, he played them for like one tournament, and he came back, and he was just hopping mad. I am not playing with this garbage. You're going to have to do something. They're like, well, we've already put all this advertising out there that, the new Palmer graphite shafts played by Gary Player. And he's like, well, you're going to have to think of something. Now, this is the 80s, so you got to remember, 4K cameras and HD and all that.
I want to play with a graphite shaft.
Exactly. All that stuff didn't exist. So the way they solved the problem was they went and got a bunch of rolls of electrical tape at Ace Hardware, and they ran electrical tape up a set of steel shafts and wrapped them around where it looked like the shafts of his club were black graphite. And he was still out there playing Palmer steel shafted irons, but on television, because you couldn't see the detail, it looked like he was playing graphite.
And that was Player.
And that was Gary Player. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, but look at baseball, man. I mean, look at the way the wooden bats that they make. Now, I mean, you think about it. Go back and look at the bat that Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and those guys swung.
And it looked that was played with.
But the bat looks like they went off and sawed a limb off of a tree and just made a handle on it, and the daggum thing weighed 35 pounds.
You can go to Louisville Slugger Factory and pick up that
bat
that
Babe hit with. What was it? 36 ounces, I think. 35 ounces.
40.
40
something ounces.
But here's another thing, and if this would have been a good question to ask Coach Payne if he was here. But what was the average velocity that those guys faced in their day too?
You had a few guys. You had Walter Johnson, you had Bob Feller, you had Christy Mathewson.
You might not see them all the time.
You had no. You weren't going to see those guys, but once in a blue moon. But you had a few guys that could.
Than when Gibson got in his.
Yeah, I mean, you had some guys that could run it up there. But I've always contended. Me and Scott have talked about this a million times. I've always said I'd love to see a statistician go back and look up how many home runs Babe Ruth had after the fourth inning when there's a pitcher out there that has nothing left, and he's just serving up the cheese.
He's already thrown 80 games that year.
Yep. Oh, every bit of it. Probably working on his fourth game of the week.
That type of math would be mind-blowing compared to what big leaguers deal with in today's era.
The specialized aspects that a modern Major League Baseball player looks at. I mean, who would have thought about stats like WAR and things like that back in the day? We would have never looked at that. I
still don't understand half of it.
What is it? Wins above
replacement.
Yeah.
But here's something that is not arguable. And I saw this clip a month or so ago, I think. And when we talk about the all-time greatest arms from the outfield, and people still from that era still want to say Clemente, I saw him make a throw from right field after gathering the ball off the wall, not even being in a good position to throw momentum-wise, turn almost flat-footed and throw a laser to the catcher at home plate from the wall. Now, that's just not something we even see in today's time.
No, you've had a few guys.
Got a tremendous arm out there.
But not like that.
I mean, good Lord.
Ichiro made a throw.
Ichiro had a cannon.
From the right field corner, he threw out a guy at third on the fly.
Yeah.
And the third baseman never moved.
Bo Jackson. You can go back and look at some of the footage of Bo Jackson when he was with Kansas City. George Brett tells one of the stories. I think Bo got one in the deep right field corner and threw a guy out at third, like on a one hop.
Yeah, I think I've seen that throw.
I mean, Griffey Jr. had a hell of an arm.
I don't know if you heard this the other day. They were interviewing Acuna, who's speaking a little better English nowadays. If you haven't paid attention, he had no English. He had an interpreter.
Yeah.
He got away from that. And I said to somebody once, I says he's costing himself millions in endorsements to talk English.
You're exactly right.
So he needs to learn that. And he sounds like, but Machado, him and Machado having an interview and from somebody, and Machado said that he was the Ken Griffey of today's era.
Acuna?
Yeah.
I mean,
he is Ken Griffey of right now. And, somebody said this a while back that, and we don't see Trout play enough, but he said Trout was Mickey Mantle of today's era.
Yeah.
But we don't get to see him play enough.
If Trout play, and we've said this before, but I mean, if you put Trout somewhere dead center of the United States, where every time zone is going to get a chance to see him on any given night, put him in Detroit, put him in St. Louis. Yeah, put him somewhere like that where you're going to see him Cubs. 2 or 3 games a week. That guy probably is making $1 billion a year in endorsements because everybody's going to know who he is.
He's just hit out there.
Does he even have any endorsements that we know of? Like any kind of big-time commercials?
Trout, he does every now and then.
But nothing like what he could
he
have.
Exploited it too.
Yeah, I mean,
if he played on the East Coast,
if he was a Yankee or a Brave or a Red Sox,
Jersey.
Yeah.
So he's
or a Met.
But there again, he's been paid pretty handsomely to stay out there in Southern California.
Yes.
Probably where he's liked living. When you got the money to live out there, it's okay.
Oh yeah.
When you don't have the money to live out there,
yeah.
It's not okay.
Yeah.
But from that standpoint, if you're right, Rusty, if he could be somewhere where people saw him religiously. Now he may have endorsements out there that commercials.
He's probably got some car. He's probably got some car lots
and
that stuff. What's the store out there? Ralph's.
Yeah.
You got a Ralph's around here.
but here's the disappointment and the sadness. And when this person said this, he said, "There's a Mickey Mantle in the league right now that nobody's watching."
Yeah.
And that's true. We hear about him. We see him in an All-Star game. But we don't really get to see him play day in and day out.
Well, and, Scott mentioned this guy just a little while ago. Ichiro was another perfect example of that. I mean, ESPN tried to do a good job of showing his highlights and stuff like that. But, I mean, if you go back now and you watch some of the stuff that we saw on Ichiro back in those days, he was doing some things that nobody was doing to that point, and really that nobody has done since. I mean, that dude, I saw a little clip of him the other day that somebody had posted on TikTok, and it was a throwing drill. He had 4 baseball bats stood up at home plate, and he was standing on second base, and with one throw each, he knocked all 4 baseball bats down. Now, that's Greg Maddux level, pinpoint accuracy right there. And we just don't, and back to the whole equipment thing. I mean, you can take that and you can put it into any sport. I watched The Last Dance all the way through again here just a few weeks ago. And there's the section of The Last Dance where they talk about when Jordan played his last game in Madison Square Garden for the Bulls. He decided that night to break out Jordan 1s and wear them again. Now, he hadn't had Jordan 1s on at that time in almost 20 years. And he wore them that night, and he goes back
Did he get fined?
No, he didn't get fined. He goes back to the locker room, and his feet are bleeding. But he scored like 30 in the first half, and he's like, I can't change now. And he plays a whole game in these things. And the first thing he does when he gets to the back is take them shoes off so fast it'll make your head spin. Because the ones he plays in, then were so much lighter, so much more cushiony. He's like, man, I had no idea how far shoes had came, Look at the NFL. Go to the College Football Hall of Fame and go into that section of it where they show the evolution of the uniform. The helmet. The shoulder pads, the thickness, it's all those. Look at soccer cleats, the way when the game first started to the ones you had to the ones they have now. I mean,
and I think we talked about this several years ago, but and I think this was the case at the time we were talking about Under Armour and Nike, but I think in worldwide, Puma leads in athletic sales. Puma.
I would not be surprised.
No, because them are.
We don't think about them as much in.
Well,
the
them
States.
or Diadora or Umbro, because that's 3 big time.
Well, Puma had a presence.
Football brands.
I think Puma had more of a presence years ago in this country.
Yeah, I forgot about
along
Adidas.
Came Nike, along came Under Armour, along came some of the others, and kind of absorbed that marketplace.
Well, I mean, Nike's basically done what they've done in more or less 40 years is what they've done that in. And I mean, they're making ridiculous money now because I'll give Nike credit, they were smart enough to realize that if you put your stuff on the right person in the right way. Converse back in the 80s, they put Converse shoes on everybody. But they didn't just say, these are the Larry Bird 1s. These are the Magic Johnson 1s. And each person had their own. Nike was the first person to come along. Phil Knight and Nike were the first ones to come along and go, we're going to make a shoe just for this guy right here. If somebody else comes along and plays for Nike, like Charles Barkley did a couple of years later, well, Chuck had his own shoe. And that was the beginning of it. Nowadays, Jason Tatum has his own shoe. Dame Lillard has his own shoe. Giannis Antetokounmpo has his own shoe. Kyrie Irving had his own shoe. Kevin Durant has his own. Steph Curry has his own. Because all the shoe companies realized this guy's got a crap ton of fans. If we cater just to them, I mean, my daughter, all I've heard for the last 2 months, Dad, we got to get some of those JT 1s. Jason Tatum has his own shoe now. We got to get those JT 1s, Dad. They got them in green and black now. We got to get them.
What they look like. Let me say this. A while back, a few years ago, we had a contest, and I really loved it, that we were coming down and narrowing down to the most iconic athlete of all time.
Yep.
And we ended up with Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
I heard some snippets the other day on a radio show that was talking about something. They didn't come out and say this, but I thought that gets me to thinking. The all-time iconic sports moments.
Oh, wow.
And that would be hard.
Oh, I mean...
But we can think of a few off the top of our
shot heard around the world.
That one.
The
Olympics.
Don Larson's no-hitter in the World Series. the three.
Possibly one of Ali's fights, Frazier. Secretariat
Wins a Triple Crown.
There's some things out there, and they don't always have to be.
Dale Earnhardt Sr. wins the Daytona 500.
John Concack's 10 points, 4 boards against Milwaukee in '87.
What about
Legend?
What about Namath predicting the Jets?
Namath making the call or just the Jets winning the Super Bowl. That was
16 point. I think.
Yeah, that was.
I know what mine is.
What's up?
Miracle on Ice.
Yeah,
and that would be one of them. But I think if we took and we made the top 10 most iconic, and it would really need some thought. But
Tiger Woods' 5th Masters, Jack 6th at 43.
But was Tiger's first win?
Well, I was going to say the way he won the first one, and I'll tell you, I would even. If I was going to pick the one signature win from Tiger Woods' career, it would be the Pebble Beach U.S. Open when he just absolutely destroyed. When he came out there with that little,
about 15 shots,
with that little stinger shot that nobody had ever seen to keep it under the wind on the West Coast, and he just ran away and hid.
He was 12 under par, and the next closest was +3.
Tom Kite.
Yeah. But every time you see Tiger, it's that big fist pump after he made that final putt at Augusta, and then hugging Earl.
That or
they never show anything from any of the other majors that year. It's always that one.
The chip shot on 16 when he the big sweeper.
Or the amateur when he
But when you're using the phrase iconic and it's getting all that publicity, that goes right hand in hand with what makes it iconic.
I wonder what people would think. What was the most iconic win? Was it Tiger's first or was it Jack's 6th?
But it's where are you? But in those moments though,
how old are you? Because that
yes, and a lot of that too is if you expand that out and you say the greatest sports moments in the world, there are people that will say Michael Schumacher's first title with Ferrari in F1 when Ferrari had not won a title since the 60s. You got people that will bring up moments in, English Premier League soccer. They'll bring stuff up, Beckham moments. They'll bring up Pele moments. There's probably, I'm sure there's big time rugby fans will tell you, or cricket. There are, in all those sports, I'm sure every fan has those. And all of us as sports fans, the three of us are not going to have probably even close to the same list because we all watch different sports. I love racing. I love golf. So a lot of mine are going to be racing and golf, but I also love baseball and I love football and basketball. One thing about the three of us is it's going to be a pretty diverse list because we watch everything. But even that, Hulk Hogan slamming Andre the Giant in WrestleMania 3. Those kinds of things. There are singular moments, and not all of them are necessarily happy moments. Because I promise you, there's a whole generation that remembers watching the San Francisco earthquake live during the World Series. Mm-hmm. I do.
Yep.
There's a generation of people that remember the hostages in Munich. There's a generation that remembers the three Americans standing on the podium with their fist raised high. Jesse Owens in Germany.
There's a whole generation of people that remember the day Dale Earnhardt Sr. died.
Exactly. Oh, I remember. It gives me chills thinking about it. I tell you exactly where I was when I heard. My dad's the one that called me with tears in his eyes.
And there's a lot of boxing moments, guys. But if you go back and you pay attention to the some of the shows that have been done leading up to the first Ali Frazier fight, that was really close to something that was Super Bowl-like.
Oh, it was, yeah.
Stars galore showed up to see that. And, of course, they went on to be other fights and other fighters. But you could argue that was way ahead of its time at that moment.
Hagler Hearns.
There's another one.
Many different Sugar Ray Leonard fights. but how many Ali fights could be? I mean, Lord, the Thriller in Manila. The Rumble in the Jungle, the win against, his first world championship against Sonny Liston.
Yeah, I think there's several, but I really
the Phantom Punch.
I really think the hype that the first Ali Frazier.
Oh, absolutely.
Might be. But I thought that, again, we had one of those things where we kind of narrowed it down to the most iconic athlete of all time.
Hey, I'm down. Let's do it.
And I thought, when I heard them talking about that, I thought, that is something interesting.
Let's all start our list here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll try to do this again in a couple of weeks.
You two one to think about, because y'all watch more TV probably in the top 10 most iconic TV kitchen tables or / dining room tables.
Oh my God.
Think about it, how they've been incorporated into the show. And some of them were incorporated a lot.
How many scenes were filmed at the kitchen table on Friends? How many, in Monica's apartment? How many scenes were filmed at the table in Jerry's apartment in Seinfeld?
All on the family.
Or at the table at Monk's?
Well, go further back, too. Think about, even the Andy Griffin Show used that a lot. All in the Family used that a lot.
Where did you come up with this?
It's a good one.
I thought y'all would like to work on that.
Hell, in the modern era, the table, the dining room table on Blue Bloods.
There you go.
Which is almost is dang near the end of every episode of the family. Mine does too. Mine does too. Mine does too.
So thinking back, if you go back deep in time, thinking about the top 10.
The Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch would be one. Think about the top 10 dining room or kitchen tables that were used the most, and where they rank in all-time TV. It goes a little bit bonanza.
Yeah.
There was always those moments.
When you sit here and you think about it, there were a lot of shows that there weren't many.
That's right.
Kitchen table scenes, now you would have to expand that a little bit and say, like there are television shows that took place. A lot of it, like for instance, Seinfeld's a perfect example. How many scenes in Seinfeld take place with Jerry George or Elaine Kramer, whoever, all sitting in a booth at Monk's?
Yeah.
Or the couch at Central Park,
I'll take you even further back. Way back. The Honeymooners.
Yeah.
They were always
sitting at a table.
Leave it to Beaver.
I knew you knew your TV.
Oh, well.
I just wanted to take you back far enough that you would start thinking about all the shows.
How many Happy Days scenes took place at the Cunningham's table? Or with Richie and Fonzie sitting in a booth at Al's?
Whatever happened to Richie's brother?
Yeah, after season 1 episode 1 after he disappears.
Yeah, and he never showed up again, and they never mentioned him.
I'm going to say he was asking for more money.
Probably.
Based on that. And they said, you know what, we've got a better idea.
I don't think we're going to need.
God, that is dang, Rob, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's fun.
I thought y'all would like that one.
It's funny though that you and I both thought of Blue Bloods though. That is, that is. In modern television, that is iconic. I mean, they finish every episode sitting around the table.
Yeah, I finish work every night, and I come back in, and Andre's
here's the
asleep,
deal.
And that's what's on.
Top 10 all-time iconic dining room / or kitchen table used scenes by which shows?
Now, if you'd said Ottomans, top 10 TV Ottomans, we could have got that. But I bet you couldn't done toilets. You know why?
They don't show those.
I was going to say they never show toilets.
So I've never understood, that series 24 when it came out.
Yeah.
Like, when did this guy ever go to the bathroom?
And give it.
Could he not
y'all
put 10 minutes in
Don't
there?
just go back to your train of thought of the 90s. Go deep.
Oh, no.
Because there's some other ones out there that were using those scenes all the time.
How many shows, you think about this, in the history of TV, how many shows really showed scenes, non-love scenes, take sitcoms, how many shows showed scenes of a husband and wife in a bedroom? And it is very few. I mean, we know that, basically Mike and Carol Brady were the first married couple on television to be shown in the same bed. Ozzie and Harriet had separate beds. Ward and June had separate beds.
Fred and Wilma
had separate beds. I mean, that just didn't happen. And you can go far into that and say that you just didn't. I mean, Cliff and Claire Huxtable, you'd see a scene every now and again with them sitting beside each other in bed, reading or something like that. That's one I can think of right off the top of my head. But there's not a lot of television.
That one would be a hard one to really.
Oh my God,
accurate.
You'd have to really.
But
no, I love yours. Yeah, I'm down, man. That's two really good topics that I'm down for.
You don't have to break it down. It don't just have to all be.
And y'all know we're getting into summertime, so it's going to be a whole lot more fun stuff like this.
Kitchen/dining room, because some dining room tables, like you're talking about Blue, that's their main.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
we're restricting it to only kitchen dining room tables
and restaurant table. And we said restaurant tables.
I was thinking operating table because of MASH.
MASH, ER, Chicago
MASH
Hope.
also had a mess hall.
But they also had a
mess hall.
And
a lot of iconic scenes in that mess hall.
Yeah. I mean that's fair game, and you're obviously going to lean a little bit towards some of the shows that.
What was it, Charles?
Probably more successful.
No. On MASH, Charles. The old English sounding guy that the real uppity guy that lived with Hawkeye and BJ.
Yeah, he came around.
Was his name on the show?
Yeah, no, his name on the show. It was Charles. It was like Charles Wellington something or something. He had like a real.
It was David Ogden Steers.
But he had like a real snooty name.
Oh yeah, he was.
And then you had Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. And
I gotta look at that.
Quite possibly one of the most hated characters ever on television, Frank Burns. Corporal Klinger. See, that to me, that is one. I still think MASH is one of the most underrated television shows of all time, especially in the modern era, because there's so many people that don't realize what a great show that was. It was hilarious, but it was also very serious and very heartfelt. I mean, those last few seasons when Hawkeye was losing his mind and stuff, and
let me say, growing up when it was coming on, I didn't follow it. It wasn't one of those.
Oh, my parents loved MASH, man.
I saw more of it afterwards than I saw during its height.
My dad loved all those like China Beach, all those military shows.
We had to watch
my dad loved all those.
Drama appreciation class in college.
Because it's one of the most perfect episodes of TV that's ever been put together. Charles Winchester, that's it. Yeah.
I agree with it. I just didn't follow it when it was happening. For what maybe it came on the wrong night for me.
When he looks down out of that helicopter and that goodbye is on top of that mountain spelled out in rocks. I mean, if that's one of the most iconic moments in television history.
What shows that finalized itself?
That end well.
I think that was one of the better shows.
There's a lot of shows that have had terrible endings over the years.
I think they did it.
But there's a lot of shows that really ended it the way they should have.
Didn't get a chance to end them.
No,
they just got yanked off the air.
Yeah, somebody said the other day. They said that was their pitch for a new television show, was that you had every episode would be a ending episode for all the shows that never got to, some type of,
sure.
If it had to be a 2-hour episode, but you tie up every show that ended too early.
And some of them might have gotten to go back after they got yanked off the air and run another show 8-9 years later to give them a chance to end it.
There was a show came out a few years ago that I really got into, and then after one season, it was gone. It was called Alcatraz. You remember that?
Yep.
One?
Remember Alcatraz?
Where all of a sudden, all these former prisoners of Alcatraz were showing back up in like modern day, and they were trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden, gone.
Las Vegas was a show to me that ended.
Las Vegas was a good show.
Las Vegas was a great show. Ended on a weird cliffhanger. They never wrapped any of it up. There's a whole list of. If my wife was down here, she's got 3 or 4 that she'd gripe about, because there's been several series that came out in the last few years.
Well, Manifest being one.
Manifest was one.
Go back and finally,
well, yeah, because they put it on. They were
Netflix.
Yeah, and made some new episodes. And
after I just finally gave up. I was like, I don't care.
And I'll watch shows with her sometimes, and I'm like, they chose to keep that on, but yet they took off some of these other ones. I mean, there's some shows to me that that show, you know, we kid around all the time. We talk about a show that jumped the shark, you know, the old Happy Days expression. But really, there are so many shows that they bring out, and especially the action shows. And it's like they throw everything that they can possibly throw at you in the first season. And you're like, really? They're going to go there in season 1? Are they that, you know, starved for viewers?
I think some shows are like this. We don't think we'll be here long.
Yeah, we better get the bang for our buck.
See if we can't buy next year.
That's right.
We spent all this money on the special effects, and by God, we're going to use them.
And I think a lot of the shows might tell you that, you know, going back some of the most popular shows in television history, they might have said, you know, we never dreamed we'd be around 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, talk about Gunsmoke. I wonder if what they thought in the beginning. Did they all think they'd be around 20-something years?
Gunsmoke was on it started in radio back in like the 50s,
yep.
man. I mean, that show went on between radio and television for nearly 40 years.
And think about and not only it had some of the same, mostly the same actors. It varied a little bit, but the writing that has to go on continuously.
I mean, they wrote the bulk of the series. Scott and I are amusing ourselves at this point, but I literally was going to say something about our most modest receptacle a little bit earlier. But you know, you look at some of these shows that, like we've talked about. I mean, there are some shows that they get off to a slow start, and then there are other shows that they grab you from the very beginning, and then you look back and, you know, that's a list. You know, what are the 10 best final episodes that you've ever seen? Because I'll tell you right now, one of my all-time favorite episodes, and you'd have to be somebody that watched the show to truly understand it, but Justified with Timothy Olyphant had one of the greatest last episodes of any show I've ever watched, because it ended in such a pleasant, non-confrontational way that you just nodded your head when it was over with, and you were content.
Let me give you an example. Going back, I guess, from the 60s and the 70s, when a show got an opportunity to be presented on national TV, it started in the fall, right?
Yep.
That's when you got your break. Just the anniversary came up of 40 years or better on Dallas. It was allowed to show on April 9th. Of 1978. So basically, it didn't go out thinking it was going to stick.
Yeah,
they gave it a okay, shut up and go put the show out there and let's see what happens. We didn't think strongly enough to put it on in the fall.
Yeah,
so we threw it out here in the spring when the chances of it being seen as well was not as good, but it took.
How many shows?
Was a summer.
That first season was only, what, 6 episodes? 4 episodes? Seinfeld.
The Seinfeld Chronicles.
How many shows did CBS try to piggyback off of Dallas over the years? Shows like Falcon Crest, you know, and stuff like that. Knots Landing. You know, all those different shows, they tried to piggyback off the back of that.
Was there one called The Ewings?
I think there was. Yeah.
Something like that.
The ones when there were the rich folks out in Denver.
Oh, Dynasty.
So they,
well, that wasn't.
No, Dynasty was ABC.
Yeah, that wasn't from Dallas.
It wasn't from Dallas.
No.
But you
got the idea.
God, you talk about you look back at Dynasty, you talk about a star-studded cast. Oh, yeah. Looking back on that show, you're like, what was the payroll of that show? I mean, you had Linda Evans was a huge name at that time. So was. What's the other girl's name? Joan Collins. I mean,
if you're gonna, you're
John
right.
Forsythe.
John Forsythe.
So much money into people.
Yeah,
we know it's
don't be whacking that bee.
We know it's got to work. Okay?
Yeah, I mean those people
we
were.
Too much in it.
Yeah, I mean they were huge, and you know. In this modern era, occasionally there's a show that comes along, and you know y'all hear me talk about this show all the time. But I'm telling you, those of you out there that are fans of sports and are fans of really funny and really good, feel-good type of shows, If you've not watched Ted Lasso, I'm telling you, you're going to regret one of these days when you go back and you watch it in syndication, because it'll be in syndication. When it goes off of Apple TV, if they don't do but these 3 seasons, and there's only, the seasons are only like 12 episodes, but there will be people that will go back and be like, my God, why didn't I watch that when it came on? Because it is by far one of my 2 or 3 favorite shows of all time. That's how good it is. And
I would like to watch it.
Okay, coming to you from Scenic City Sports real soon, top 10 most iconic table scenes from any show on TV, mostly presented by Rusty and Scott.
And top 10 iconic sports moments presented by all of us. Yes. And we may even.
But if y'all mess up on the
I may see if I can invite us a couple of guests in for those sports moments. I'm thinking of a couple of folks at school that might be willing to help out on that.
Well, there's so many, and I think even you bringing up the Andre the Giant Hulk Hogan, that is there a bigger moment that you can think of in WrestleMania than that? Has anything surpassed that in WrestleMania?
No, I think that is the quintessential WrestleMania moment. I do think, now you're talking wrestling television, there are 3 or 4 big-time events that happened. I mean, Chris Jericho making his debut on WWE at the time was kind of a nonchalant thing, but you look back on it and realize that was the beginning of what would be one of the greatest overall, I mean, I don't care what anybody says, one of the greatest overall wrestling careers in the history of the sport was right then and there. So
Austin's beer truck.
Oh, or Kurt Angle's milk truck.
Well, either him or him throwing Rock's belt into the river.
Rock's belt into the river. Is it live or is it Memorex? When you look down at that pager and you see 316.
But nothing's going to beat when Vince was in the hospital.
Oh, my God.
And Austin showed up and hit him with the bedpan.
But another humongously consequential moment happened in that same segment. Look, Mr. McMahon, it's Mr. Sacco. I mean, that would go on to be one of Foley's shticks for years. Yeah. And it was just a passing...
Well, great TV, guys, and we love that, but I don't think any of those would fall into the 10 most iconic sports moments.
Well, folks, pay attention. These lists will be coming to you. Of course, if we do them right, we'll do like I usually do. I'll try to find the videos and put something together.
One of mine also had to do with Claudette Washington, but...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's more on the local television side. Well, folks, we thank you for tuning in with us. Thanks to all of our all-star sponsors that make it possible for us to bring Scenic City Sports Podcast to you. We love you guys. We'll talk to you next week, same time, same place.